Welcome to a lecture on the parts of speech. I'm Margaret Students and I'm going to provide an overview of the parts of speech and what they do. In this particular lecture, I'm going to focus on what I think are the three most important parts of speech, and we're going to call them the big three. I'm sure you've heard the term parts of speech, but let me tell you what they are. Parts of speech are labels for the different jobs words do in a sentence. And believe it or not, every time we see a word in a sentence, it's performing a particular job so that that sentence can work. We have 8 of these parts of speech. You can see them on the screen here. In this lecture, we're going to focus on those big three, and they are the noun, verb, and the pronoun. For most parts of speech, the definition of the part of speech tells us what that word's function or that parts of speech function is. Nouns are different. Here's the definition. A noun can be defined as a person, place, thing, idea, or quality. And I have several of those listed as examples on the screen. However, nouns do multiple jobs, so this definition doesn't really tell us what the function is. Let's look at that in the next screen. Nouns actually have 4 jobs. Those jobs are subject, object, complement, and possessive. The job of subject is probably the most important one in a sentence because the subject is who or what the sentence is about. And you can actually ask yourself that question to figure out the subject of a sentence. Object is another job nouns do, and that occurs when we have a noun that is receiving the action of a sentence or working as a teammate with another word, like a preposition or an infinitive. We also have complements, and all complements are renamers, and most of the time we see those right after the word that they're renaming. Like here we have my sister Audrey. Audrey is renaming sister. We also have, last but not least, the possessive. And you can kind of get an idea of what that means because we've all heard someone say, her boyfriend is so possessive. Possessive means that a noun shows ownership. And we can create that situation by adding an apostrophe and an S to a regular noun, or if that noun is made plural by having an S on the end, all we have to do is put the apostrophe after the S. And I've got the word Audrey again, and we're showing that she owns a cat or possesses a cat by putting the apostrophe S on the word and placing that possessive noun in front of the other noun. Verbs are words that show one of 2 things, action or doing, or they may show state of being, and all that means is they're saying what the subject is. So with verbs, the definition really matches the function, and you can see this on our screen. Verbs tell something about the subject, and that's going to be either what the subject is doing or saying that the subject is something. Another thing we need to know about verbs is that they often work in groups, and I put on your screen here that verbs are like wolves. They often travel in packs, and that is very, very true. When we have packs of verbs, the verbs that are piled on the front end of that verb group are called helping verbs, or you might hear the term auxiliary verb. I've got a list of some of these here: is, must, might, can, could, should, and so on. Many of these verbs can also stand alone as a verb by itself. Is, am, had, are some of those that can be by themselves as the verb in the sentence, but they also can support another verb. Here we are at the last of the big three, and that is the pronoun. Pronouns are not, as you can see here, are not professional nouns, but they do a very specific job. They substitute for nouns in a sentence. Why? This helps us have variety in our sentences so that I'm not talking to a class. I'm giving you an example here. If I'm talking to a class and I say, Margaret Students wants the class to pick up the class's books and begin reading on page 50. That's a very cumbersome and awkward sentence. It's much easier and clearer to say, class, I would like you to pick up your books and begin reading on page 50. Big difference in that what is essentially the same sentence. So that's why we have pronoun. And again, the function of a pronoun matches its definition. In other words, pronouns are substituting for nouns. But pronouns are, as I say on the screen, persnickety. We have to use a particular pronoun that matches the job that a noun is doing in that sentence. And we also have to know whether the pronoun is supposed to be singular or plural, because the word that it's substituting for is going to be either singular or plural. So we have to know two things. What the job is that it's substituting for, and we have to know whether it's singular or plural. And we have to know a little bit more, as we'll see on the next screen. Now, I've already told you that nouns have 4 jobs. The job of being the subject, the job of an object, job of a possessive, and there's one that you don't see on this screen, and that's the job of a complement. But with pronouns, we use the subject pronouns to serve as renamers. So that's what we always do. So that's why you only see 3 up here on this chart. The other thing that this chart shows you about pronouns, and here we're looking at personal pronouns. These pronouns reflect being singular or being plural, and they also reflect whether we're talking about ourselves, that would be first person. Are we talking directly to someone? That's second person, and I've got my cursor showing you second person. Or are we talking about someone or something, and that's third person. So we have all 3 of these reflected on this screen. And as you can see, the pronoun changes depending on the job and depending on whether it's singular or plural. With possessive pronouns, you see that we actually have multiple words that could serve for these same jobs as singular or plural, and it depends on where the pronoun is in the sentence, and that's a different lecture entirely. But this gives you an overview of the pronoun. So, in this lecture, we have looked at what the parts of speech are, and that is jobs in a sentence that different words do. And we have focused in on the 3 most important of these parts of speech. We focused on the noun, and we know that nouns do 4 different jobs: subject, object, possessive, and complement. We know that verbs show action or doing or what something is. And we know that pronouns substitute for nouns and have to substitute depending on the job the noun does. Hope this helps, and I'm going to see you in part 2.